It's easy to think of early Native Americans as men armed with the bow and arrow, but the genetic and archaeological record increasingly reveals the role of women as carriers of culture, genes, and resilience. They gathered plants, knew the migration paths of animals, and shaped the rhythms of early life. The presence of women and children in dangerous areas, like the mammoth-stalked lakebed of White Sands, suggests that entire families moved together, not just male hunting parties. The wind-swept shores of an ancient lake in what is now White Sands, New Mexico, still bear the ghostly imprints of a prehistoric woman walking across soft mud, carrying a small child. Her stride was steady, her pace urgent. At times she shifted the child from one hip to the other. There are gaps in the prints where she must have stopped, perhaps to rest or look behind. Then she turned back, retracing her steps. What danger was she fleeing from, or was she simply returning home across a perilous stretch of land teeming with mammoths, giant sloths, and dire wolves? These footprints are not just the oldest known human prints in the Americas. They are echoes of a story long buried beneath the sands of time, a story of ancient women, migration, survival, and evolution. From this lone woman in White Sands to Naya, a teenage girl who died in a sinkhole in the Yucatan, to Luzia, whose skull lay hidden in a Brazilian cave for over 11,000 years, the physical remains of these early females offer us profound clues about where they came from, what they looked like, and how they lived. But who were they truly, and how are they all connected? The story of the first Americans is etched in the landscapes they traversed, the bones they left behind, and the genetic legacies they passed on. Among these early inhabitants, women like the White Sands footprint maker, Naya from Yucatan, Luzia from Brazil, and the Penon woman from Mexico City stand as pivotal figures. Their footprints, skeletons, and DNA illuminate the peopling of the Americas, revealing a saga of migration, adaptation, and survival amid a dynamic Ice Age climate. By weaving together their archaeological traces, genetic profiles, skull morphologies, and the environmental context of their time, we can reconstruct their journeys from North America through Central America to Brazil, tracing the paths of the first Native Americans. Discovered in the ancient lakebed of Alkali Flat, the White Sands footprints date back to between 21,000 and 23,000 years ago, much earlier than the once-dominant Clovis First theory of American settlement allowed. The prints, preserved in fine layers of gypsum, tell an unmistakable story. A woman, based on foot proportions and stride, walked nearly a mile while carrying a child, setting her feet firmly in the mud. At several points, a child's tiny footprints appear beside hers, then vanish again, suggesting she set the child down or carried it in her arms. The footprints are flanked by tracks of mammoths and ground sloths, showing the coexistence of humans with Ice Age megafauna. But what's most haunting is the human dimension, how the spacing, drag marks, and impressions bring to life not just a human, but a woman and caregiver, a hunter or gatherer, crossing a dangerous landscape during a cold and dry glacial maximum. What kind of world did she walk through? At the time, New Mexico was not a desert, but a windswept grassland fed by glacial meltwater. The vast pluvial Lake Otero once shimmered here before drying up. Temperatures were cool and the climate was dry. Bands of humans likely followed large game across the ancient lake beds and river valleys of what is now the southwestern United States. But the most compelling question isn't how she survived, it's where she came from. The White Sands footprints challenge traditional timelines, pushing human presence in North America back to the last glacial maximum, 26,000 to 19,000 years ago, when ice sheets covered much of Canada. The woman's presence implies that early humans navigated a harsh, cold landscape, likely following ice-free coastal or inland corridors from Beringia, the land bridge connecting Siberia to Alaska. Her footprints lack associated skeletal evidence or DNA, but their age aligns with the genetic divergence of Native American ancestors, as seen in later fossils like Naya and Luzia. Roughly 13,000 years after the White Sands woman walked across a muddy shoreline, another young woman, perhaps 15 or 16 years old, lost her footing in the darkness of a cave and fell to her death in a cenote deep beneath the Yucatan Peninsula. There, in the submerged pit known as Hoyo Negro, her skeleton remained undisturbed for millennia, preserved in crystal-clear water until divers discovered her. Named Naya after a Greek water nymph, her nearly complete skeleton provided a rare opportunity to extract ancient DNA from an early female inhabitant of the Americas. Her mitochondrial haplogroup was D1, a lineage that likely emerged in Beringia and spread throughout the Americas, especially along the Pacific and inland coasts. But her DNA wasn't the only thing that surprised scientists. Her skull morphology did too. Naya had a narrow, projecting face, sloped forehead and small, round cranium, traits more reminiscent of Australian Aboriginals or African populations than the broader, rounder faces typical of modern Native Americans. This sparked an old debate. Were the first Americans a separate population from later Native Americans? Or had their appearance changed over time through isolation, evolution and mixing? Naya's genome provided an answer. Despite her different appearance, her DNA was unequivocally Native American. In fact, she was genetically closer to modern Native American populations than to any other group. The implication? The early appearance of Australo-Melanesian or generalized archaic traits in the Americas was not evidence of a separate migration. Instead, it reflected the broader diversity within the founding population, likely shaped in Beringia before entry into the Americas. Further south, in a cave in Lagoa Santa, Brazil, archaeologists in the 1970s discovered the skull of another young woman who lived over 11,000 years ago. She was dubbed Luzia, and for decades she was considered the oldest human ever found in South America. Like Naya, Luzia had a small face, low forehead, and long, narrow cranium, morphological traits that also sparked theories of separate origins or early contact with Australoid populations. The morphological differences seen in Luzia may reflect both environmental adaptation and the high variation present in early Americans, rather than evidence of a separate wave from across the Pacific. Her narrow face and tall stature mark her as a Paleo-American, distinct from modern Native American cranial features. Ancient rock art in South America showcases the Ice Age fauna and mirrors rock art found in the American Southwest, suggesting cultural continuity. Yet Luzia's DNA, though difficult to retrieve due to poor preservation, has more recently been modeled using newer techniques and compared with ancient DNA from the region. The results again pointed to a single founding population of Native Americans, with multiple lineages spreading southward via coastal and inland routes during and after the last glacial maximum. Naya's DNA, extracted from a tooth, provides a genetic cornerstone. Her mitochondrial haplogroup D1, common among modern Native Americans, confirms she belonged to the ancestral population that migrated from Siberia via Beringia. Her genome shows no non-Native American ancestry, resolving debates about Paleo-American cranial diversity. Naya's genetic profile links her to both northern and southern Native American lineages, suggesting that by her time, the descendants of Beringian migrants had spread across the Americas. Further south, in Brazil's Lapa Vermelha cave, Luzia, a woman in her early 20s, lived 11,500 years ago. Discovered in 1974, her partial skeleton, primarily a skull, survived a museum fire with 80% of fragments recovered. Luzia's long, narrow cranium initially suggested Australasian affinities, sparking theories of a separate migration wave. However, DNA analysis revealed she was entirely Amerindian, with haplogroups typical of Native Americans. Her genome aligns with other early South Americans and confirms genetic continuity with modern indigenous populations. Luzia's presence in Brazil, just 1,000 to 1,500 years after Naya, indicates rapid migration from North to South America. Her DNA, like Naya's, supports a single Beringian migration, debunking earlier hypotheses based on her skull's morphology. Luzia represents the southernmost reach of this ancestral population, adapting to Brazil's tropical environments far from the icy north. What we see in Luzia, then, is a distant cousin of Naya, one who migrated far from her ancestral roots, possibly following rivers and coastlines through Central America, across the Amazon basin, and deep into the heart of what is now Brazil. In Mexico City, near Lake Texcoco, the Penon woman, discovered in 1959, offers another glimpse into this era. Dating to 12,700 to 13,000 years ago, her nearly complete skeleton, including a dolichocephalic skull and pelvis, identifies her as a young adult female, about 4.9 feet tall. Unlike Naya and Luzia, no successful DNA extraction has been achieved due to degradation and early excavation methods. However, Her morphological similarity to Naya and temporal alignment suggests she shared the same Beringian-derived ancestry. Penon woman also shows morphological features more aligned with so-called generalized archaic humans. Like Naya and Luzia, her skull challenges the idea that all Native Americans looked like modern northern populations. But these differences likely arose not from a second migration, but from a single founding population carrying a wide range of phenotypic traits, which were gradually shaped by genetic drift and adaptation. In fact, as recent genomic studies have shown, some of the oldest skulls in the Americas belong to people with genetic signatures firmly rooted in the Native American family tree. Her dolichocephalic skull, like Luzia's, initially fueled speculation about non-Native American origins, but genetic evidence from contemporaries like Naya confirms she was part of the same Native American lineage. Her presence near Naya underscores Central America's role as a hub for early populations. The skulls of these women, Naya's narrow Paleo-American face, Luzia's long Australasian-like cranium, and Penon woman's dolichocephalic structure, highlight a critical issue in paleoanthropology: morphological diversity versus genetic unity. Early researchers, noting these skulls' differences from modern Native American features, broader, shorter crania, proposed multiple migration waves. Luzia's skull, for instance, was likened to Aboriginal Australians, while Penon woman's was compared to archaic populations. However, DNA from Naya and Luzia, and inferred ancestry for Penon woman, reveal these variations as part of the natural diversity within a single Beringian-derived population. Paleo-American skulls, formed under Ice Age conditions, reflect adaptations to diet, climate, and small population sizes, not distinct ancestries. Naya's narrow face may indicate a diet of soft foods, while Luzia's long cranium could result from genetic drift in isolated groups. The Penon woman's dolichocephalic skull aligns with this pattern, reinforcing that cranial morphology alone is a poor indicator of ancestry. Modern Native American skulls, shaped by millennia of environmental and cultural changes, differ but share the same genetic roots. From New Mexico, women carried children down the spine of Central America. Others crossed the Isthmus of Panama, navigated the riverine web of the Amazon basin, and settled in rock shelters and forest clearings. Some buried their dead in caves, others left only footprints. These women were the bearers of knowledge, memory, and continuity. They were the daughters and the mothers of the New World. Today, Naya's face has been reconstructed in striking detail, a young woman with wide eyes and a soft expression, her features speaking across millennia. Luzia's skull, tragically damaged in a museum fire, has been digitally preserved, and the White Sands woman's footsteps remain etched into the earth like a whisper from the Ice Age. Each of them tells a piece of the same story, that the peopling of the Americas was complex, early, and guided by deeply human instincts, to protect, to explore, to endure. They are not myths or abstractions. They were real women with names now lost, who walked across an ancient land with children in their arms and a future in their footsteps, and we still walk in their path.